Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be getting into some pretty out there stuff. You guys sent in this wild lecture transcript about quantum physics and personal growth and business success, all mixed into one. It's a lot to unpack, but we're going to break it down and see if we can make sense of it. Ready? Let's dive in.
It's definitely a unique combination of concepts. The lecture starts with this almost humorous anecdote about a man in India who's convinced he's achieved, total unity with the quantum vacuum.
Okay, I got to admit, not the opening I was expecting. What's with the quantum vacuum and the elephant?
Right. So he's having this profound experience, feels totally unified with everything, and then an elephant shows up and kind of ruins the moment. It's meant to be funny, but it highlights a key idea.
Yeah.
Even if you believe you've transcended the physical world, you can't ignore that it's still there.
Makes sense. You can't exactly meditate your way out of an elephant stampede. But what is the quantum vacuum exactly? Layman's terms.
It's not really empty space. Think of it more like a sea of potential energy where everything is interconnected. So even an elephant part of that interconnected reality.
So even when we think we've got it all figured out, there's a whole lot more going on beneath the surface, right?
Exactly. And the lecture takes this idea of interconnectedness in some really interesting directions. Like they connect the saying, turn the other cheek to quantum mechanics, which I thought was fascinating.
Okay, now that's where I start to get a little lost.
Right.
How do you go from biblical advice to quantum physics?
It's all about energy and frequency. The source material talks about how responding to negativity with more negativity is like mirroring a negative frequency. But when you turn the other cheek, it's like shifting that frequency, creating a different outcome.
So instead of getting sucked into the negativity, you're consciously choosing a different energetic state.
Exactly. It's a very different way to think about that old adage, right? And this idea of aligning with a certain frequency actually ties into the lecture's perspective on setting goals, too.
Okay, let's talk about goals. What's the quantum approach to achieving what we want?
The source emphasizes setting goals that align with your current capacity for belief. They use this very relatable example of someone making an average salary who dreams of owning say, a fancy sports car. Nothing wrong with having aspirations, but if your beliefs are still rooted in scarcity, that goal might remain out of reach. It's like your internal reality has to catch up with your external goals.
So if you don't truly believe you can achieve something, it's unlikely to materialize.
Right. It's about recognizing that our deeply held beliefs, even the subconscious ones, play a huge role in shaping our reality. And this doesn't just apply to personal goals either. The lecture then pivots to the business world and asks, why do some entrepreneurs achieve massive success while others struggle?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What's the secret sauce?
The lecture points to this concept of disfrute, which is Portuguese for enjoyment, but with a deeper meaning. It's more about aligning with a flow of creation, finding true fulfillment in the process of growth and achievement.
Disfrute. I like the sound of that.
It's not just about fleeting pleasure, it's more about deep satisfaction in what you're doing, connecting with your purpose. And they give this really powerful example, albeit a somber one, about prisoners in concentration camps.
Wow. Okay, that took a turn.
Yeah, but it illustrates the point. The lecture talks about how the people who survived those horrific conditions often focused on intellectual pursuits, anything to keep their minds engaged and growing, even in those circumstances.
That's a powerful reminder that the human spirit, that drive to learn and grow, can persevere even in the darkest of times.
Absolutely. And it ties into this idea that where we focus our attention matters. It impacts not just our mental state, but potentially even our physical well-being. The lecture goes on to make a pretty bold claim, suggesting that negative thoughts can actually create antimatter that builds up in the body and leads to illness.
Okay, now that's a lot to unpack. While I can see the connection between our thoughts and our health, the idea of our brains generating antimatter seems like a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the more out there claims. But even if we don't take it literally, it raises an interesting point about the mind-body connection.
Right. It's a good reminder that while we don't want to get caught up in every far-out theory, there's often a deeper message to consider. So we've gone from unifying with the quantum vacuum to turning the other cheek to the potential impact of our thoughts on our health. Where does this deep dive take us next?
We'll buckle up because the lecture takes a sharp turn into the realm of extreme longevity. They suggest that humans could potentially live for thousands of years through cell renewal.
Living to 20,000. Sign me up. Though I imagine there'd be a lot of paperwork involved. But seriously, that raises some huge questions. Could we even handle that kind of lifespan? And what would be the implications of having that much time?
Right. It's a mind-boggling concept. And it ties into another key theme of the lecture, the idea of individually constructed realities. They use this really interesting example of an earthquake in San Francisco.
Okay, earthquake metaphor. How
Yeah.
does that relate to our own personal realities?
So they talk about this building after a major earthquake, right? Most of it's rubble, but there's this one section still kind of standing.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's supposed to illustrate how even in the middle of chaos, our individual experiences can be totally different. Some people are devastated, others walk away relatively unscathed. It all depends on your perspective, your beliefs, how you've built your own reality.
So one person's earthquake is another person's walk in the park, metaphorically speaking.
Exactly. It's a powerful concept. And the lecture takes it even further with this story about Joel Goldsmith. He was a metaphysician who supposedly healed people remotely just by refusing to acknowledge the existence of illness.
Hold on, he just thought illness away.
That's the gist, yeah. It plays into this idea of the power of belief, the placebo effect. Maybe our minds have a much bigger impact on our physical reality than we realize.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. If our individual realities are that malleable, does that mean our collective reality is too? Like, if we all focused on negativity, could that actually be impacting the world around us?
Now, those are some big questions. But before we spiral down that rabbit hole, the lecture does offer a more practical application of these quantum principles, particularly when it comes to business and success.
Okay, so from potentially healing with our minds to launching billion-dollar startups, all thanks to quantum physics. I'm listening.
It's about shifting your mindset from limitation to possibility, right? They argue that if you view the quantum vacuum, that sea of potential we talked about, as a source of infinite possibilities, you can tap into it for inspiration, innovation, even financial abundance.
Like having a direct line to the cosmic idea factory. I like it.
Right. But then they throw in this really interesting but kind of frustrating concept, the X factor for accelerated growth.
The X factor. Sounds intriguing, but also a little vague.
Yeah, it's one of the more enigmatic parts of this lecture. It's presented as this system or process for rapid learning and development that leads to amazing results, but they never fully define what it's like they're giving us a glimpse of a secret formula, but not the full recipe.
Okay, now that's just mean, but also kind of a fun challenge. Can we figure out this X factor on our own?
Maybe. While the lecture doesn't give specifics, it stresses the importance of pushing boundaries, both personally and professionally, being open to new possibilities, having that growth mindset.
So even if we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, we can still focus on those core principles of growth and expansion.
Exactly. And this isn't just about individual achievement either. The lecture introduces this concept of quantum teams.
Quantum teams. And now we're really venturing into uncharted territory.
That's right. They paint this picture of the future where entire companies, maybe even families, operate with this shared understanding, this accelerated growth. Imagine the possibilities if everyone was on that same wavelength.
Taking teamwork to a whole new level. Less conference room, more collective consciousness. But how do we apply that to our own lives, whether it's at work, with family, or even just friends working on a project together?
It circles back to those same principles. Communication, shared vision, openness to new ideas. When everyone feels heard and respected, when there's that trust and willingness to collaborate, that's when amazing things can happen.
So the ingredients for a successful quantum team aren't all that different from what makes any team successful.
Yeah,
Clear goals, mutual respect, and a shared sense of purpose.
exactly. But maybe by adding in this awareness of our interconnectedness, that power of belief, we can amplify those positive dynamics and achieve even greater things together.
It's a lot to consider. From elephants in the quantum vacuum to curing diseases with our thoughts, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We really have. It's fascinating how this lecture connects these seemingly disparate concepts. From personal growth to quantum physics to business success, it really makes you think about the bigger picture.
That's the beauty of these deep dives, right? Exploring these big ideas, even if we don't always have all the answers. It's about expanding our perspectives and asking new questions. And speaking of questions, but before we get too comfy with those warm, fuzzy quantum teen vibes, this lecture does leave us with one final, kind of mind-blowing question. And it goes back to that idea of thoughts shaping reality.
Right. If our beliefs, even the subconscious ones, are influencing our experiences, then what kind of world are we collectively creating with those thoughts?
Whoa. It makes you wonder, are we manifesting more metaphorical elephants in our lives? Or are we focusing on the potential for growth, connection, maybe even a little bit of that quantum magic.
And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? We get to choose. We get to explore these concepts, question our assumptions, and approach life with a sense of curiosity and possibility.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this. What kind of reality do you want to create today? And who do you want to be in that reality? Keep those questions in mind. And until next time, happy exploring.